I'll get onto that in just a minute, but I want to ask you your top-line view of the PM's speech today.
Look, I think he's right to focus now on how we're going to come out of the restrictions that I think have been understandably imposed in response to the potential, and I think I emphasise potential pandemic, because Australia's had a terrific record at actually avoiding the worst aspects of the pandemic, and our death rate is very low, and indeed our infection rate is low. So I think he's right to focus on how we're going to recover. And it seems to me that there's a bit of a fork in the road here. We can either come out in a way where the private sector can recover to the maximum extent, invest, create jobs, or we can look to the government for ongoing assistance, ongoing compensation, and ongoing debt accumulation. I mean, I think Josh Frydenberg has been absolutely right. This is money that would have had to be borrowed had they not revealed this accounting error. It wasn't money that was just sitting around. So I quite enjoyed the Prime Minister's speech, to tell you the truth.
All right, well, I've got to ask you about the miscalculation. What did you make of it, the $60 billion accounting error?
Well, you know, it's a kind of interesting thing. You wonder whether there was some sort of groupthink stroke panic going on in Treasury. So when the estimates were first created, things looked bad. And so it was kind of probably not much more than a back of the envelope calculation. But, you know, I've always been called myself the dumb blonde in these meetings, but I guess more the devil's advocate, because if something looks wrong, it probably is wrong. So they were sort of suggesting that 6.5 million workers would be on JobKeeper. So that was basically half of all the total number of employed persons as we went in March. Now, that sounded way too high because, you know, we had the public sector working, we had mining, manufacturing, agriculture working, we had a lot of people working from home. So half always sounded too high. I think what happened was that then there was the mistake in the tax office with the form filling. And so it was kind of what I call confirmation bias. So they thought, oh, yeah, that looked, you know. So instead of actually asking themselves, you know, they needed someone like me in the meeting to say, look, I don't think this is right, go and check it out again. They just kept going because they had that confirmation bias from, as it turns out, incorrectly filled out forms that the ATO
complex forms, I know, but this goes to the whole problem about modelling. I mean, I remember Kevin Rudd's emissions trading scheme in the middle of the GFC, and that modelling was all economic sunshine, all uplift and wonderful growth forecasts, which were nothing to do with the reality. But it tells you, you know, when Treasury is in activist mode, I think they push a barrow that goes beyond advice to almost diktat. And if the Treasurer or anyone else in a political office don't pick up and push back a bit, Treasury rules the roost. And speaking of Treasury, I mean, I'm going now to Martin Parkinson, a former head of Treasury, Malcolm Turnbull's former head of Prime Minister in Cabinet. He, along with the Property Council, say, well, this is just the time now that we desperately want Australia to take more migrants. He's saying, you know, it's really important that we use this crisis to bring people to Australia that are skilled workers. Now, you and I think are on the same sort of page here. Why on earth would we want more people to come here at a time we've got so many Australians out of work? Absolutely extraordinary, Peta. And indeed, I think reflects or it misunderstands the public mood. You know, I feel incredibly sad that a lot of businesses, a lot of people who put their life work into building businesses have basically had them destroyed. A lot of workers, through no fault of their own, will have had their careers destroyed, careers interrupted, will have to be seeking other areas of employment. And yet here it's rent seeking. It's basically they are talking their own book. The property industry is talking its own book because it wants the population to rise quickly. And in order for that to happen,
it therefore leads to a lot of construction. But seriously, and indeed props up property prices. I'm just hoping...
I've got to go, Judith, but I want to grab you before we do. This bullet train link, Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, the Grattan Institute this week said, look, it's ridiculous, do not go ahead with it. They say it's a white elephant. You've long looked at this issue. What's your take?
They're absolutely right. I wrote an absolute cracker column last year, actually. I looked it up for the purposes of this program. So maybe your listeners should go and check it out.
I'll put it on my Facebook page. I'll put it up on my Facebook page.
They have been a disaster everywhere, including in areas which have big populations and densely populated areas. So do not even think about it, would be my recommendation.